This little pair of red socks here. The curators believe these were made between 200 and 500. These are really old socks and a very, very rare survivor from that period. They were found in a place called Oxyrhynchus in Egypt on the site of a Greek Orthodox monastery. Is that our desire to decorate ourselves and express our own identities in very individual ways goes back, way, way, way throughout history. We're with Louis XIV, the French Sun King. He loves dressing up. He really likes dressing up. They start here in 1750 in order to raise money to go to war. One of the things that they did was they recognised that across France there were some really talented artisans and craftspeople in terms of porcelain making, goldsmiths, furniture makers, and fashion and textile designers and makers. So they set about reorganising the guilds, the trades guilds, to make them more efficient in terms of training more people so that more luxury goods could be made to sell more stuff to raise more revenue from taxes. The connection between the guilds, and particularly the fashion and textile guilds that Louis and Colbert reorganised, and the great brands that we know today, the great French fashion houses, the ateliers with their craftspeople in the workshop of a great designer like Dior or Chanel or Yves Saint Laurent. You have these ateliers, these workshops where people with absolutely exquisite skills are working, and the structure of that has come down to us from the work that Louis and Colbert did. Louis demanded that the aristocrats that came to his court wear the latest fashion. Yeah? So they all had to spend loads of money on silks and embroidered clothes and furs to raise even more money, that twice a year the aristocrats would have to throw away their entire wardrobes. You're way ahead of me, you too, I think. They threw away their entire wardrobes and bought a whole new and more fashionable set of clothing. And we are still, and again our researchers and curators tell us they can trace down through history, we are still living with the fashion seasons: autumn, winter, spring, summer. Fashion and textiles were promoted in a form that was structurally the same as this. A single person, one outfit, promoting the latest fashion. And if you think about that, we are still marketing fashion in exactly the same way. We're now coming into the Rococo period. This is not even made to be worn from the outside. Well, we must assume that the coat that went over it was cut away so that you can see some of that beautiful embroidery. But even so, this is really elaborate for what is basically an undergarment. So if you could afford this waistcoat and the matching coat that went over it, and presumably a little pair of breeches underneath as well, you were filthy rich. We're in 1950s and we're in Guyana in the Caribbean, and we're with a woman called Beryl Gilroy. She's a young woman. She wins a scholarship to come to the UK to study education. She did what many people from the Caribbean were doing at the time. She got on a boat, she came over to the UK, part of a wave of people which we now call the Windrush generation, coming to the UK to help us rebuild after the ravages of the Second World War. A lovely little red travelling suit which a local tailor called Nat Gaines had made for her. In Britain, it is raining, it is cold, there is still post-war rationing, it's miserable. Everyone else is wearing various shades of really, really dull. But of course, Beryl also stands out because of the colour of her skin. We're in the 1920s and the 1930s, and we're with a fashion designer called Charles James. In his day, he was regarded as the greatest couturier of his day. Even Christian Dior called Charles James the master. The precision, the perfection of that folding across the shoulders, the perfection of the little keyhole, and details which are not so obvious to see, but if you look at the kind of slight blousoning underneath the chest, apparently very subtle, takes in exquisite work at the top there. What you'll see is that there is a pattern on this fabric. Charles James is primarily known for his monochrome column dresses, like the gold one there. Charles James was doing what a lot of designers in the 1920s and 1930s did, which was to collaborate with artists from the Surrealist movement. You may be aware that Elsa Schiaparelli collaborated with Salvador Dali, a Surrealist artist called Jean Cocteau. It's quite hard to see, but that's because he's a Surrealist and he's teasing you and he's making you want to look at it really, really closely. So it's a double portrait of him and his male lover at a time when homosexuality is illegal. Now, this dress was given to us as part of the Cecil Beaton collection, and the story that came with it, imagine that the woman that wore it, it was so expensive. You know, he's the greatest couturier of his day. It must have cost an absolute fortune. So she must have been some sort of socialite, or possibly she was an actress. Perhaps she felt like the bee's knees. She could afford a Charles James dress or to have one bought for her. She was going somewhere really swanky, but apparently she did not know she was wearing a surrealist homosexual joke.
Eres muy hermosa.
There is an extra fold.
Detrás eres aún más hermosa.
So I absolutely love this bay. We've got Alexander McQueen, and over there we've got Vivienne Westwood, all sorts of absolutely wonderful things.